Welcome to Community Forum, a program designed with you in mind, addressing things that concerns you. Stay tuned for today's topic.
A lovely good morning and welcome to another edition of Community Forum right here on Radio Christian Voice. I'm your host, Christabel Kamono. Now, Community Forum is a program where we discuss issues that matter the most to our communities and seek practical solutions through informed dialogue. Today we focus on a matter that continues to affect thousands of families across Zambia, gender-based violence, commonly known as GBV. Now, despite years of awareness, campaigns, policy reforms, and legal interventions, the number of reported cases remains alarming. According to the Zambia police, more than 10,000 cases of GBV were recorded in just the first 3 months of 2026, highlighting the urgent need for stronger action and collective responsibility. Why do these numbers remain so high? Are enough survivors coming forward? Is our current approach working? Or is it time to rethink how we prevent and respond to GBV? And to help us unpack these critical questions, we are joined by GBV advocate Alice Sakala. Good morning, ma'am, and welcome to Community Forum.
Good morning, Christabel. It's lovely to be here, and good morning to our listeners as well.
Thank you, ma'am, and it's good to have you on Community Forum. But before we get into today's topic, we just want to remind our listeners that we are still in the national mourning of our former Vice President, who is Mr. Guy Scott. Now, Secretary to the Cabinet, Patrick Kangwa, announced the death of Dr. Scott in a statement issued in Lusaka, describing him as a distinguished statesman who made significant contributions to Zambia's political and national development. Dr. Scott served as Zambia's vice president from 2011 to 2014 under the Patriotic Front PF administration of the late President Michael Sata. Following President Sata's death in October 2014, Dr. Scott became acting president, making history as Zambia's first acting head of state from a minority racial background. He served in that capacity until the election of President Edgar Lungu in January 2015. Before serving as vice president, Dr. Scott represented Lusaka Central constituency as member of parliament and held several ministerial portfolios, including Minister of Agriculture and Cooperatives, where he played a key role in shaping agricultural policy. Dr. Scott was widely recognized for his outspoken nature, intellectual contribution to public policy, and long-standing commitment to Zambia's democratic governance. Throughout his political career, he remained an influential figure in national affairs and continued to contribute to public discourse after leaving office. And following his death, President Hakainde Hichilema accorded Dr. Scott a state funeral in recognition of his distinguished service and immense contribution to the nation. The president also declared a 5-day period of national mourning from Thursday, July 16, 2026 to Monday, July 20th, 2026. And according to Secretary to the Cabinet, Patrick Kangwa, the state funeral church service will be held at the Anglican Cathedral of the Holy Cross in Lusaka at 10 hours on Monday before Dr. Scott is laid to rest at Leopards Hill Memorial Park. Government also announced that members of the public will be able to pay their last respects at Belvedere Lodge along Leopards Hill Road in Kabulonga during the morning period. For those that are just tuning in, this is Health Space right here on Radio Christian Voice, and today we are talking about gender-based violence, and in the studios I am joined by a gender-based advocate who is Madam Alice Sakala. For your contributions, you can reach us on 0956 200 490, and you can also leave a message in the comment section, which is on Facebook. Ma'am, as we get into today's topic, who is Alice Lungu, for those who might not know you?
Okay, it's always very interesting to answer such a question. So, I am first and foremost a sister, a daughter, a friend to many, but my name is Alice Sakala, and I am a biologist and educator by study. But of course, most importantly for today, I'm a mental health advocate as well as a GBV advocate. So my work, especially more in the recent past, has dwelt on awareness, on helping people that are struggling with different mental health issues as well as GBV cases, and just trying to make sure that we get the word out there in the community about GBV and how we can curb it. That's basically who I am.
Oh,
Yeah.
and for how long have you been a GBV advocate?
Okay, so I have been doing a lot of mental health work for years now. I would say about 4 or 5 years when I started doing my psychosocial counseling, and it's quite interlinked because most of the cases on psychosocial counseling you'd find there are some cases on GBV. But my work intensified this year, February, when it hit close to home, and I lost my elder sister, Alice Sakala, to GBV. That was when it became more personal for me to make sure that people don't have to go through the same pain that me and my family had to go through. That 4 to 5 years, and then intensified this year, February.
Talking about you losing your sister to gender-based violence, do you mind sharing how it happened?
Sure thing. I remember it quite vividly. It's hard to forget. Yeah, so my elder sister, it was actually a case that was all over social media. Alice Sakala, she was killed by her significant other, her boyfriend, February 19th this year. We got a call as a family around midnight. That's when one of my sisters was called by him, and then the news spread to say actually she was, by the time my mom was finding her, she was already gone, and that has been a struggle to deal with. The case is still in court, so there aren't many details that I can share for now, but it is in the media space, and so we are now court cases and things like that. She was a lovely soul, may her soul rest in peace. And it was, I think, news that was had to digest for us. But, like I said, this is when the fight against GBV intensified for me, because you can turn your pain into purpose, right? And I think that was the approach here. So, yeah.
And how far did you pursue the death of your sister? Were there justice?
Not yet. The case is still in the High Court, and we're still going, back and forth, trying to see how the case is going to proceed. We haven't made much progress in that space yet, but we can confirm that progress is being made, and I'm sure that justice will be served.
In your own words, what does GBV mean to you?
Okay, so when we talk about like a professional answer, GBV would then be, any harm that is done to a person of a particular gender. Then we can say it's either a male or a female, right? And when we say harm, we are talking about physical harm, we are talking about emotional harm, psychological, sexual harm as well. But basically that is done to a person. That is what it means like in the professional terms. But when you say what does it mean to me, like I said, it has become more personal, and GBV for me is loss of identity for a person. It's loss of life, right? It's empty chairs at a family setup because maybe somebody lost their lives. It's manipulation and somebody not being the best they can be because of what they're enduring. But of course it can either be towards a male or a female. Physical harm, emotional harm, psychological harm, even financial harm, all that can translate into GBV.
Well, according to the statistics by the Zambia Police Service, the country recorded over 10,000 GBV cases. That's in just 3 months of 2026. Now, at what point do we stop calling this a social problem and begin treating it as a very serious matter?
Christabel, 10,000 cases in 3 months, right? That's a lot. Now, imagine if this was maybe a virus infecting people, and we are saying 10,000 people have been infected by a virus. It would be considered a national crisis, isn't it? And would see quite a lot going on. It's literally the same thing. 10,000 cases in 3 months is too many cases. This is not a social issue right now. It's a national crisis. And I feel like the same attention that we would give to maybe, let's say, 10,000 cholera cases, right, should be the same agency and attention that we address when it comes to GBV cases. That is a lot of cases. It's not a social issue anymore. It's an emergency. It's a national crisis. And we need to address it with the agency that it deserves. When we look at 10,000 cases, we can't individualize those cases. We are saying this is 10,000 plus families that are being affected by this. Because, like I said, 10,000 people, being exposed to cases of GBV would translate into 10,000 people that are, struggling to be who they really are. Among those cases, we'd find that about 78% of that is the female gender, right? And then the rest is the male gender. Also telling us just how, intense this issue is. Out of those cases, we would also be able to translate and see that there are some children that are also affected there. Now, if we have that many people and they're struggling when it comes to GBV, that tells us to say, whatever it is that we're doing, we need to consider it as urgent. We cannot have 10,000 cases in 3 months. Yes, the statistics are going to tell us that this has dropped from last year, right? But 10,000 is still a lot. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's a public issue now. It's a public health issue. It's an economic issue. It's a development issue. It has to be given the urgency that it deserves. It's a national crisis. That's how I see it. We cannot have 10,000 reported cases. It's too much.
What measures do you feel perhaps government can consider, putting in place to ensure that we fight GBV?
Okay. First and foremost, thumbs up. Government is doing a lot when it comes to the fight against GBV. I think the message has been resounding. And, having all these cases on social media out there, it's showing just how big a problem it is, right? So things have been done, and people need to be aware that strides are being taken. For example, we have the GBV toll-free line, which is great. You can actually call in when you feel like you're being victimized, when you feel like your life is in danger. That's great. We have victim support units. We have the one-stop centers. So all that work is being done. But I feel like this is groundwork, okay? Implementation now, that's what left. Because if we have all these things in place and we still have 10,000 plus cases in 3 months, then we're saying we need to look into the implementation. Yes, there's a toll-free line, right? But what kind of help do I get when I call the toll-free line, okay? What message am I going to get? Yes, we have victim support units and they're offering counseling, right? But how effective is this counseling? Yes, we can take, our case to the police, but I'll remind you of a recent case where somebody was given a call out to go and give to the perpetrator. So you see, we have systems in place, right? But the implementation, I think, is what we need to look at. And not just government, but also every other stakeholder. Because this, like I've said, is a public health issue. It's a public issue now. And each and every one of us has got a role to play. We cannot completely pin it on the government because, look, the victims are coming from families, right? And you'd find that somebody would want to take a step and then the family says, no, try a little harder, you know what I mean? But in trying a little harder, you lose the person. And so Yes, government is doing a lot, but there's still a lot more to be done. We cannot have 10,000 cases, like I said. So we need now to look into implementation. We need to look at how are we implementing what we have put in place. Yes, we have victim support units, right? But what is the case on the ground when somebody comes through to the victim support unit? What is the case on the ground when somebody comes to report to the police, right? We need to fine-tune these systems. I'm still taking you back, Christabel, to the case where, somebody reports that they have been, beaten up by the husband. And then this person is given a call out to go and give the same husband that was beating her up. You know what I mean? Now, when we look at that kind of a system, we have seen the results, right? And we actually lost 3 people, actually, because of, how that issue was handled. And I know we cannot completely pin it on that, but it is one of the things that has really affected us. Now, let's look at somebody else that has been in that situation, right? And was scared enough to say, I'm not going to take this call out to the same person that was beating me. That one has gone unresolved, isn't it? Maybe other people would have also been given a call out, and they just stopped along the way and said, I can't take this to the same person that has, beaten me up. So we need to fine tune the system. Yes, we have things in place, but implementation, that's what we need to begin to work on now. The reporting system, okay? What are people taught when they go and report? Sometimes we hear cases of, my husband beat me up and I want him to be arrested, right? And then somebody says, have you, sat down to talk? Right? Have we sat down to talk, honestly speaking, right? That's sending the person back to the lion's den. And those are the things we need to look at. Yes.
So there shouldn't be such questions when you go to the police reporting about GBV. We shouldn't be sent back to our husbands to say, have you guys sat down and discussed about this issue?
We shouldn't, Christabel. We cannot handle a case like that. I know we're going to be taught, no, wisdom has to be put in place. You need to try and reconcile. The church setup is going to tell you need to forgive. You know what I mean? But forgiveness is not, it doesn't substitute accountability, especially if it would land somebody in the grave, right? Especially if it would land somebody maybe to have broken bones and they cannot continue to do what they're doing. I don't think that is the approach. It's not working. You know what I mean? There has to be accountability. If we want the behavior to change, there has to be a way that it is handled in such a way that the person is held accountable. There's a lot of these issues, actually. People will be taught to say, go back and talk. You know what I mean? This is your husband or this is your wife. Let's not, just dwell on the female gender. It could also be this is your wife, because some women are also, violent. And that is not the right approach. We have seen that it is not working. You can't send me back to the person and say, go and talk. I've come to you and I've shown you that I'm bruised. You know what I mean? I've been broken. I've been beaten up. There has to be a different approach. That won't work.
Well, of course, the stats will only show you those people that manage to report. How much do you think the number is?
I think the 10,000 is just the tip of the iceberg, honestly speaking. Look at our culture, right? Look at the normal way that women and men do things. I'll dwell a little bit more on the men here, Christabel, because we need to see just how big the problem is. If a man is, experiencing GBV, so now we are saying this man is being beaten up by the wife, for example. Do you really think this person is going to come out and say, my wife beats me up? There are very few people who are going to do that, isn't it? Because of the shame. Naturally, society is telling us as a man, you need to be strong. You know what I mean? So how will a person who has been given that status to say you are strong, you are mighty and you have to have control, how is that person going to come out and say, my wife beats me? It becomes very difficult, isn't it? So that is part of the statistics of people that are not reporting. The men that are actually undergoing GBV and cannot speak out. It's it's happening in these homes. And like we've said, GBV is not just physical abuse, it's also emotional abuse, it's financial abuse, right? It's sexual abuse, and we have a lot of unreported cases related to that for men. We also have women now, and men who will say, I can't report this because of stigma, right? So that's also part of those, that part of the iceberg that we can't see. We also have people that are financially dependent on the same abusive partner. So then now this person will be thinking, how do I report in Kadienshimailo? What am I going to eat tomorrow if I report this case? Or how am I going to survive? How am I going to take care of my children if I report this case? So we have a lot of unreported cases because of the many dynamics that are attached to GBV. People will not come out. Maybe sometimes they've reported and nothing really has been done, right? So they're saying, even if I go out there and report, maybe I won't get the help that I need. If I'm financially dependent on this person and I report, how do I survive the next day, right? If I report, my family is telling me, keep the marriage, try a little bit harder. All those are part of the statistics. I really think, and being somebody that's very analytical, I look at data and I really think, the 10,000 is a very small number. Yes. Trust me, we could even have double or even triple. That's what I think, because there's a lot of dynamics. We have made progress as Zambia to get to 10,000 reported cases. That's great progress, you know what I mean? But trust me, with the kind of work that we need to do when it comes to awareness, when it comes to implementation and systems, there's a lot more that hasn't been reported. We could be looking at close to 40,000, 50,000 cases of GBV. And I think it's also because people don't know what GBV is, right? We focus on the physical, but the person that is being emotionally tortured, for example, that's GBV as well. But they won't come out and say, this person emotionally tortures me, you know what I mean? Because they don't understand that that also has an impact on who they are. Somebody maybe that is being financially abused, that is also GBV. They will not come out and say, go and report and say this person financially abuses me, right? Because maybe they don't have an understanding that that's GBV as well. So because of the limitations on awareness, as well as all the different dynamics and stigmas that I mentioned, I feel we could be close to 50,000 cases or more.
I'm interested. You spoke about men shying away from reporting GBV cases. Bale umfensoni bala mbwena monje mwa ume mfilo kukosa.
Yes.
What would you tell them right now?
A simple message, right? It is better you speak out and get the help now than have your family crying over your dead body. It can get to that point. It really can get to that point. And abuse, now when we get into like mental health issues, right, abuse can be normalized, Christabel. Sometimes people that are being abused can get to a point where they feel like it's normal. I have spoken to women who interpret abuse as love. Okay? And men can get to that point as well. Sometimes when you go through something over and over again, you could normalize it. And for men particularly, it's normalized because apart from that, there's a certain shame that is attached to being abused as a man. This is the reason why we also have a lot of cases of sexual abuse for boys that are not reported. Because it starts when they are young. That toxic message to say, as a man, you have to be strong. I know men have to be strong, right? But, there's a limit to what strength is. We really need to define strength, because sometimes speaking out when you're being abused is strength, okay? Hiding away is the weakness, because then you are interpreting it in a wrong way. And we have a lot of boys, we have a lot of men that have been sexually abused and they have not come out because of that message that we are sending. We really need to change the narrative. If you are being abused, abuse is towards a human being. Okay? Whether you are male or female, you are a human being and you do not deserve to, experience abuse in whatever form. And you need to speak out because it's painful, Christabel. I would rather you speak out and say, I am being abused, and people say whatever it is that they're going to say, right? But you get the help that you need, as opposed to having your family now crying because this person was killed, and they hid away the years of abuse. And so if you're a man out there, and you are undergoing or experiencing abuse, get the help that you need. Speak to somebody. Speak to somebody, say it out. And like we've said, it's abuse in any form, whether it's financial abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, whether it's physical abuse. Speak out. Your life is far much more important than what society is going to view you because you reported a case of abuse. You know what I mean? Would rather have you around. Would rather have you present in family gatherings, would rather have you contributing to, the success of the nation, would rather have you here than lose you, because you couldn't speak out, and you couldn't speak out because you're a man. That shouldn't be the case. And it's the same with little boys, that are being sexually abused, are being physically abused. Look, let's change the message. Abuse is abuse, regardless of the gender that it is, that is experiencing that. And it's toxic to go out to a man and say, you can't go and tell people that, your wife is beating you. No, let them speak out, let them get the help. It's not normal, and it shouldn't be normalized. We should reprimand it at all costs. We really should.
Would you say normalization has contributed to the rise in GBV cases?
It has. It really has. Culture is formed, right? Most of the things that you and I believe in, Christabel, most of the things that we think are normal or are not normal, because of, what has been normalized, what we have been taught from childhood, what we have been taught, whether by being taught to say this is this or just by observation. All those things have shaped who we are today and what we believe today. Sometimes you'd, read articles where people will tell you, our mothers of old endured this, you know what I mean? This was normal for them. A woman had to be maybe treated a certain way for her to be put in line. She had to be, if it's shouted at, she had to be beaten up, you know what I mean? And on the male folk, now this is where I will say a male child would be told, metalila, things like that. And that is what shapes what we think is okay and what we think is not okay. And, such trauma has been translated even into our children, right? It has been translated even into the recent generations. And there are certain things that we have consistently done that are normal. Now, as a mental health advocate, right, I'll tell you certain things about maybe, let's say, parenting. There's certain approaches to parenting that normalize certain things. There's approaches to marriage that normalize certain things. There's certain lessons that maybe we get as, we interact as male and female that will shape our perceptions about GBV now. And so it's been years and years and years of being taught certain things that normalize GBV. That's why it will be years and years and years of awareness and of deliberate moves to ensure that we change that narrative and change the behaviors that are going to get us to a point where we don't have so many cases of GBV. Yeah.
Well, for a long time, the country has pushed in a lot of money in GBV awareness activities.
Yeah.
Yet the figures remain high. You mentioned awareness, but we know that the country has kind of you know, has been making efforts
Yeah.
to push in a lot of money to ensure that people are made aware of, the importance of reporting GBV cases. But then the numbers remain high. What could be
Yeah.
the problem?
It's the approach. It really is the approach. Look, awareness will give you information, okay? Awareness will make you know to say, oh, GBV is wrong, right? But then now there's another part of awareness that I feel like we have been neglecting that we need to work on. Yes, I know that I shouldn't be a violent person, right? You have told me that I shouldn't be a violent person. But in your awareness, are you dealing with the issues that lead to that violence? Just because you tell someone don't beat, it doesn't mean the anger issues that they have bottled up are going to be dealt with. Let's get back to the statistics again, right? 78% of those 10,000 are women, and then the rest are the men, right?
Yes.
So it means that men are the higher statistic when it comes to being perpetrators. Over the years, there's been a lot of focus on the girl child. A lot of interventions have been done for the girl child, isn't it? We have so much work that is being done dealing with the female and the like, and great progress. We've gotten to this point as women, where we're empowered and all those things, we know who we are, we are taking up positions of leadership. Great. But because of the neglect on the male folk, we have seen a lot of work not done there. And as a result, we have kind of left our men behind when it comes to making progress on mental health advocacy and on a lot of other things. Look, Christabel, if you're pumping money to tell me that I'm not doing well, that, I should not be violent, yes, you've told me, but are you dealing with my underlying issues? At what point do I get to a point where I'm comfortable with being abusive, right? What has led to that? In mental health, we see a lot of issues, parenting, for example. We see unresolved trauma. We see anger issues. We see complete disregard for human life. It's stemming from somewhere. So when we pump in the resources, we now need to look at deeper interventions. We need to get to the root. Telling people that we should say no to GBV is a very superficial approach. Yes, we will get the information to them, but it has to be consistent for us to get behavior change. It's the behavior that we are trying to deal with. And when it comes to behavior change, it's not going to happen just because you told me. Let me give you an example, right? We see GBV cases on the internet every single day. And it doesn't end on this woman was killed or this person was beaten up. No. They'll go a step further and tell us that apart from that, the suspect is in custody. Isn't that scary? Now, if I'm a perpetrator and I read that and I hear the suspect is in custody, that should at least deter me, isn't it? But it doesn't. Tomorrow you're going to read another story about GBV. So it tells us that the awareness itself is not enough. There are deeper issues. People would usually say, but why does the woman stay in an abusive relationship, right? But why does the abuser keep on abusing? When we get to answering that question, it will make our resources yield a bit more results. We need to have a very deliberate approach. It's not just about knowing what GBV is. It's not about knowing that, the law will come for you when, you're violent. That's not enough. We need to look at interventions that are going to answer to the why. Why does the abuser keep on abusing, right? What is the anger behind? What is the trauma behind? What's the reason why this person feels it's normal to beat someone to a pulp? You know what I mean? When we can address that, that is when our approach is going to be more meaningful. We need to answer to the root, the very reason why people become abusive in the first place. That's what we need to address now. Other resources that we take into awareness must be coupled with interventions that go to the root. And I know it sounds like it's a lot of work, you know what I mean? But that's what is going to stop us from getting all these cases. We're still saying 10,000 is a lot. That's too many cases. And awareness, yes, people know. They are fully aware, but we now need to get deeper when it comes to resolving these issues. It's a mental health issue. We need policies that will direct even psychosocial counseling. We need different parenting approaches. We need more impact now in terms of dealing with where the GBV tendencies are coming from.
Are you suggesting perhaps a counseling for both men and women?
Yes, I am. I am suggesting counseling. I'm suggesting mentorship. Okay, I'm suggesting an overhaul on our perceptions when it comes to issues to do with trauma. I'm sure you've heard this statement before where we say hurt people, right? And if I'm going to strike another human being, if I'm going to hurt another human being, there has to be somewhere it's stemming from. Yes, we are going to say this, the people are dysfunctional, this is not a good person, but how did you get to that point? In counseling, that's what we try to deal with, right? Like, how did you actually get to this point where you completely disrespect human life to that extent? You know what I mean? And once we can get to this point where it's deliberate behavioral change counseling, if it's deliberate, we are going to see a bit more results yielding. We are going to see people having a completely different perception. Conflict resolution, right? You are married, the two of you are married, and you have a misunderstanding and it turns into a fight, right? Then now we are saying, at the point of marriage counseling, for example, was conflict resolution discussed? Okay, and to what extent? What is your understanding? At what as a couple, what should the approach be? So it has to be more intentional. Every single person that is involved in the lives of people must understand to say, look, we need to discuss emotional intelligence. Even in schools, if schools could have a program where we discuss emotional intelligence, people then begin to learn from a tender age, how to resolve conflicts, how to socialize, how to respect another person, how to be kind to one another. These are the messages that need to be really inculcated into people for us to get to a point where behavior changes. Resolving GBV is a behavioral change approach. It has to be a behavioral change approach. Now, to change behavior, you need to start reforming already formed, perceptions. You know what I mean? And that's where we need to get it. Deliberate interventions, counseling for men, counseling for women, counseling for children. And every person that is involved at this step must just know that this is what we are trying to do. Churches need to know what they can do in this fight. Schools need to know what they can do in this fight. But we need to begin to reform people and deal with the issues that are leading to GBV. GBV is just like the result, but there are so many things that are stemming that are actually getting us to this place.
Before we move any further, we're also told that Lusaka has always recorded the highest number of GBV cases. And one would wonder, what do you think could be the problem?
I really don't think GBV is like, can have like geographical confines. I don't think so. Maybe a lot more people in Lusaka are reporting. That's why we think there's a lot of GBV cases in Lusaka. Maybe people here report, you know what I mean? But maybe the other areas don't report as much. We can't just, how people say, no, Lusaka is for business and relationships don't work in Lusaka, things like that. I think there's just like a certain stereotype that is attached because it's Lusaka. But it could also be that we have higher cases in Lusaka because a lot more people in Lusaka are reporting as opposed to other places. In that case, then we would say, so maybe Lusaka is doing something right? We can look at it from that perspective. If we have a lot more cases reported here, it could be that a lot more people here are comfortable reporting, yeah? And if we look at it now from that direction, Lusaka is more of, an urban area, isn't it? And so because of that, maybe people now are more knowledgeable. Maybe the interventions when it comes to awareness, get help, and maybe they are working out here. maybe we need to take the the message out even to the other provinces and see what we are going to get. It could be that it's a bit more intense here and people actually understand that, and that's why we have a lot of cases being reported. On the other side, it could also be that we have a lot more issues maybe within Lusaka that are leading to GBV. Maybe people are abusing substances more here, and as a result, it's easy for us to have these cases of violence and the like, right? Maybe people here are, being a little bit more careless with life, such that they expose themselves to things that would actually lead to GBV. So there are many dynamics, but I'm leaning more towards the possibility that a lot more people are reporting here as opposed to other places, and that is why we have more reported cases here in Lusaka.
As a GBV advocate, where do you think we could be having more cases of GBV cases? Could it be in rural areas or urban areas?
I think it's both.
It's both?
Yes, it's both. Because like we've already said, Christabel, it's stemming from mental health issues, right? And mental health issues are not limited to an urban area or a rural area. It's just the dynamics that's changed. For example, we have a lot of people in urban areas that are receiving treatment for mental health issues, right? As opposed to rural areas because of accessibility. That doesn't mean that we have, a disparity in terms of where do we have more mental health issues. So I feel like it's both. Even when we look at the news that we get, right? It's a mix. You hear of GBV in a rural area, you hear of GBV in Lusaka, you hear of GBV on the Copper Belt. So it's really a mix. It's not really dependent on what kind of setup am I from. It's more of a mindset issue, and mindset issues are literally everywhere. Yeah.
Wow, society is somehow normalizing GBV. I know it's something that we earlier talked about. A woman has been taught to stay strong regardless of the abuse a woman might be going through in the same marriage. What are you doing as an advocate to challenge the norm?
Okay, so after my sister's death, May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and then June was Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And one of the things that I did that really changed how I look at GBV was offering free counseling sessions for the months of May and June. The response was overwhelming. There were so many people reaching out, and I must mention that it was both male and female. And those counseling sessions, I think, helped me really have a broader picture of just how deep GBV cases are and how people interpret them. So it was one of the key interventions that I did, and it was very interesting. The response was great. I spoke to so many different people, and I think, thank God, I also had some colleagues that said, look, if it's overwhelming, we can, share the load. And we had so many people that we were speaking to. And there's been so many great testimonies that came out of that. I'll give you an example of a certain lady that I spoke to. And the reason why she stayed was because she didn't have the financial muscle to leave. Okay, and so we did our counseling sessions, and then a few weeks after that, she actually reached out and said, hey, I want to start a business. I want to, get myself back on my feet so I can, have my leverage and actually leave this abusive. And it was, very meaningful to say, oh, look, this person actually got it. Like we said, it has to do with behavioral change. We also had some people reaching out, and they're telling us, look, the reason why I can't leave is because my family is telling me I should stay. So then now you say, okay, can we have a conversation with your family and make them understand just how bad this is? And those conversations were had, and we've had a lot of, success stories come from that. So that's one of the things that deliberately I did with my colleagues, Potrin and Akpas, we actually did the counseling, and it was, when we did the first post, when I did the first post, I was like, oh, hey, free counseling sessions. I did not expect to get the response that I got, but so many people reached out. And for me, that told me to say there are certain people from these statistics, right, that need the help, but maybe they just don't have the means to get the help. They just need somebody to talk to, because that's all it takes sometimes. Someone to give you a very neutral perspective and tell you, look, this is not good for you. Just that word in itself will get somebody thinking about, the situation they're in and how they can, leave that situation. So that was one of the things. Apart from that, I'm also a facilitator and a trainer, and so I have different trainings and facilitations that I do, team building and things like that. Deliberately, one of the conversations that we bring up during those sessions is mental health issues. Well, we tell people, look, if you have issues you need to heal from, heal. You know what I mean? People have got childhood trauma, and they can translate that childhood trauma and begin to cause trauma to other people. And so when we have these sessions, deliberately, I know like it's a professional setup, it's corporate, but it's still human beings in those places. You can still reach those people. And so just having those conversations will, get people to realize, oh, maybe I'm behaving this way. Maybe I'm being violent because I have unresolved issues. So we have conversations like that. And those are some of the steps. And deliberately just any given point, if there is somebody you can speak to about mental health, about GBV, I take that opportunity and do that, because we need to get the message out there. People need to normalize talking about it. Usually GBV is something that people will shamefully hide. You know what I mean? They would want to sit in a corner and not talk about it, especially women. We've talked about how women are taught to say, you must endure, kushipikisha, and things like that. So deliberately in every setup, have deliberate conversations about these things. Talk about it. It's hard talking about how I lost my sister, but I try to bring it up so that at least somewhere it should click in someone's mind, that it can get this far. And if we can have these conversations, then you'll find someone actually say, oh, you know what, I actually experienced this. Do you think it's GBV? Or I experienced that, and the more we normalize talking about it and reprimanding it for what it is, it becomes easy to get the message out there. So I think those are some of the things that have deliberately done and that have really changed my perspective on what our approach to GBV should be.
All right, thank you very much for that information.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be going for a short break. Do stay tuned.
Okay.
Well, we continue with our discussion on Community Forum. In case you are just tuning in, this is Radio Christian Voice, your home since 94, and this is Community Forum. I am your host, Christabel Kamunu, and today we are discussing issues to do with gender-based violence. And in the studios, I am joined by a GBV advocate, who is Madam Alice Sakala.
Hey, good morning once again.
Thank you. And before we went on a break, we talked about how women have been taught to remain strong in marriages despite undergoing an abuse.
Yeah.
And I remember you mentioning that one of the things you are doing as an advocate to challenge the norm is perhaps just, making women comfortable and reminding them to normalize reporting these issues so that, they can be helped in one way or the other. And we move to our second question, which is, in most Zambian traditions, a man is considered head of house, and that in most cases breed GBV.
Yeah.
What role should traditional leaders play in this regard?
Okay, so the message still remains that the man is the head of the house, right? But when we speak of being a head, what is our interpretation of that, right? A head would be provision, protection, security, leadership, and GBV looks nothing like that. Okay, if you are supposed to be a head and you're a provider, GBV, basically you are taking away the security that you're supposed to offer, you are taking away the comfort that you're supposed to offer, you are taking away the leadership that you're supposed to offer. And so traditional leaders have got quite an authoritative and influential voice, and they must be the key players in this fight against GBV. So what role do they play? I feel they need to send a very clear message as well, to say, look, GBV is reprimanded. It is not something that we accept. We have to stop GBV. How do we do that? Mostly when it comes to leadership, whatever it is that you normalize as a leader, that becomes a norm, right? So we have different setups in the traditional aspect. Let's say, for example, a case is reported, and a woman comes out and says, look, I've been beaten by my husband, right? There's going to be maybe a traditional court setup where maybe they'll say, okay, go, have a conversation, you know what I mean? But if we can have traditional leaders substitute that with, actually, let's report this case to the police, that is going to send a message out there to say we are no longer dealing with these issues casually, because their consequences are not casual at all. So if traditional leaders can add their voice and say, okay, we will not be having these traditional courts where the person is said, okay, stop, have a conversation, and then tomorrow we still have the same issue, and then they are saying, okay, now when this issue happens, we're actually going to take the matter to the police. It's going to help us to curb these issues. If we can have traditional leaders be deliberate about, dealing with issues of child marriages, because those are also linked to GBV, dealing with issues of sexual exploitation, those are also linked to GBV. And if they can deliberately say that the law is actually going to take its course, I feel like people are going to deter from actually being perpetrators. It has to be different now. We shouldn't be too casual in our approach. We shouldn't have people, feeling like, the headman is going to side with me, because I'm a man. And they're like, people now need to say, even the headman, even the chiefs, every traditional leader in their capacity is speaking the same language, because that's what we need to do. We shouldn't frame justice or help depending on the context that we want to, because of our leadership or authority position, but rather we need to speak the same language. You are a perpetrator, you are going to be handled by the law. This case is going to be reported to the police. You know what I mean? These are the consequences, and everybody must understand that they'll be dealt with accordingly. So traditional leaders do have that role to play to ensure that there is enforcement. Aside from that, Christabel, I think traditional leaders also now must get to the point where we are having conversations that sound a bit more proactive than reactive. Now we are getting to a place where we're saying, let us prevent GBV. A lot of conversations that we have around this are taking us to what do we do when it has happened, right? But now we are saying, what do we do to stop it from happening? So now we need to see voices in the community that are backed by traditional leaders that are going to advocate for healthier relationships. Okay? And when we say healthy relationships, child marriage is not a healthy relationship, right? So those are some of the things that we need to deal with. Prevent GBV by saying, okay, what does a healthy relationship look like? And how do I add my voice to ensure that people know what a healthy relationship looks like? What does healthy masculinity look like? You know what I mean? Because if we are saying you are the head of the home, we're referring a lot now to masculinity. But what does it really mean to be a man? What does it really mean to be a head of a home? If we can have traditional leaders speak to people or empower people to have these conversations in the communities, we're going to see a different face of headship in the home, healthy communication, conflict resolution, like we spoke about earlier, healthy relationships, dealing with issues of sexuality in the community, whatever it is, you know what I mean. But basically, whatever approach we are going to take, especially when it comes to our leaders in the communities, it has to move towards prevention of GBV. We have to be a bit more proactive. We know what the causes of GBV are. We should have conversations, interventions, approaches, and awareness that deals with making sure it doesn't happen. I think that should be the approach that we should take, really.
All right, you can start preparing your messages. You can send your messages on 0956200490. You can also leave your messages in the comment section, which is on Facebook, RCV News. Well, moving forward, Ma'am, the church has been a custodian of peace unity and reconciliation. But then we still see those staunched believers being victims of GBV. Where could be the problem?
Very interesting. I'd like to look at it in two ways, really. When we are getting our message out there as the church, right? What are we really saying? If a couple comes through and maybe there's an issue of GBV, right? And maybe they say that the first approach we'll take is go for counseling at church, right? What is the message there? Is it just forgive and forget and then it happens again? Or is the message a bit more deliberate? When we ask people to say, okay, forgive, right? You were beaten, you should forgive. Must forgiveness replace accountability? Immediately we start sending that message, we are then diluting the entire message of stop GBV, right? You can forgive a person, but they must be held accountable for the crime that they are committing, for the harm that they are bringing. And so I feel like the church has not really understood what its position is when it comes to the fight against GBV. If there is a stakeholder that is very well placed to help in preventing GBV and to dealing with cases in case they do arise, it is the church. When people are getting married, where do they go for counseling? They go to the church, isn't it? Do we have deliberate curriculums in the counseling that is done at the church that addresses this issue? We have a council of churches, right? How is it regulating this particular message in the church? Can we then say deliberately we are going to have a session where we talk about, GBV in marriages and how it's going to be handled when the churches are doing the counseling? A huge percentage of people that get married do seek counseling from the church. And so they're very well positioned because you see GBV is happening in the homes, right? In the family setup. So if there is a stakeholder that is so well placed, it's the church when it comes to the preventive approach. Because whatever message you're sending up to that point must be very clear. Let's be deliberate. Can we have regulation where there is an actual curriculum and people are taught about this GBV issue before they get married? You can prevent GBV ABCD. In a case that you become a perpetrator, the church will not support you. The church will not back you up. You know what I mean? You are going to be arrested. There's going to be this kind of an approach. That message has to be sent by the church as sternly as it should be sent. And like I've said, we are saying let's prevent GBV. The stakeholder that can send this message is the church. When we are doing the premarital counseling, what kind of content are we offering to this couple? Okay, they need to learn conflict resolution, they need to learn communication, all those things. It has to be so clear that even the GBV message comes out during that counseling. Like we've said, we are talking about dealing with the behaviors. Then it also means that it has to be so deliberate that when certain tendencies are noticed, the church can also come in and say, look, we've noticed that there's some trauma that you haven't dealt with and it could lead to this. Let's deal with it. There's a certain, behavior that you have that could lead to, you being a perpetrator or you receiving GBV and thinking it's something that is normal. All those are things that can be dealt with. So if there is a partner in this fight, it's the church. And that message can be sent very clearly. We have women's groups, we have youth groups. Can we use those platforms to talk about it? As Christians, right, we know that God values our well-being and he wants us to prosper, and to be in good health. And that is a message that we hear in the church. But look, GBV is one of those things that just becomes the opposite of that well-being that we need to have as Christians. And so it's a conversation we must have. In the Women's League, let there be deliberate messages sent, awareness sessions where, yes, we will talk about our spirituality, we'll talk about growing in Christianity, but really the family is a huge part of society and the church grooms that part of society. Now, GBV comes in to disrupt that, right? So it is also some sort of, we could say, a weapon that is really affecting families. And so what the church needs to do now is, when we are having these couples retreats, these youth camps, these women's leagues, these men's fellowships, right? These are the things that we should talk about at a men's fellowship, where we are saying 78% of GBV victims are women. When you are talking about issues in the men's fellowship, are you talking about issues of GBV? Are you handling that? You know what I mean? Because if they are the huger perpetrators, then when we are able to gather them in a place like this at the church, these are the issues we should talk about, where we groom men, mentorship, and we're having conversations that are changing the narrative and changing the behavior tone, so that we can have better fruit and better results coming out of that. So the church needs to be a bit more deliberate. Let the message come out. And GBV in all its forms: sexual exploitation, physical harm, emotional harm, psychological, whatever it is, the church is so well positioned. The influence of the church is amazing. When the church speaks, people are going to listen. So let it be very deliberate about sending this message as staunchly as it can.
Well, you've mentioned of the church being deliberate on talking about talking about GBV.
Yeah.
But then, should couples also go and seek help from the church?
Yeah.
Whenever maybe their spouse is being abusive in one way or the other?
Yes, couples should seek help, Christabel. But what I want to say is, when they come and seek help, what will the message be? What will the measure be that the church is going to put in place? Okay? If I come to the church and say, look, my husband is violent and he's been beating me upright, and there's evidence of violence, what is the church going to do about that? Are we going to send the person back and say, no, go and bring your husband, let's come and talk? Or is the law going to take its course, right? Or is the church able to provide maybe safe houses? Because there are people who, because of the GBV, they know that there's going to be retaliation and they can't go back to that place, right? So they need a safe space to be in. We can send people to the church to seek help, but what kind of help are they going to be offered? That's the most important thing. If we are going to just say, no, forgive and let's talk to this person, and then a few weeks down the line we find that the person has been killed, then the help that we are offering is really not being as impactful as it needs to be. People can get help from many different places, right? They can go to the police, they can go to the church and all that, but it is the kind of help that we are going to offer. Let us see GBV for what it really is, right? It is leading to death. It is leading to, psychological trauma. It is leading to, broken homes, broken families, lives are being lost, livelihoods are being affected. When we see the problem for what it really is, it is also going to help us to understand what kind of help we must offer. So if I will come to the church and seek help, what will the church do? What is the regulation there? What is the policy there, right? So that the church doesn't send me back with a message of forgiveness and love and reconciliation, and then 2 weeks down the line I'm still going through the same thing, and then now I say, if I go to church, they'll tell me that I should just reconcile and we should have the conversation. So we need to be strict about what kind of help people are getting in these churches, at the police, wherever it is that we are sending them to get help. That's the thing. I know we want people to reconcile, and I know we want people to love and the like, but let's look at God's love, for example. I don't think GBV translates into what God's love really is. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when we say God's love, we now need to send a message and say, look, what you are doing is contrary to what God describes as love. There has to be a certain regulation. Even scripture itself must guide us on how we are going to help people that are reaching out for help. That's my only worry there. We must not overemphasize reconciliation at the expense of somebody's life. We might be sending people back to a place where we won't have them the next few days. So yes, go and seek help, but churches out there, let us define what help looks like. There's a place for reconciliation, there's a place for accountability, and there is a place to ensure that behavior is changed by the law taking its course.
We are now opening the phone lines. You can call us on 0956200490, and you can also text us on the same number, which is 0956200490. You can as well leave a comment. You can as well leave a message in the comment section, which is on Facebook, RCV News. Good morning. Hello, good morning. Well, we lost that one.
Okay.
Well, I think there are messages for you here.
Okay.
If that man is arrested, how do you come in provisions to the family who remain Evans Kitwe?
Okay. So if the man is arrested, then how and you know, those are some of the issues that we really need to address, right? Because like we said, some of the reasons why people will not reach out to get help is because, you know, they have no means of standing on their 2 feet. That is why when we were talking about stakeholders and doing what they need to do, that is some of the things that we need to look at now. We have different arms and stakeholders that need to deal with these issues, and we actually have forums and, you know, institutions that will look into the well-being of people. It's just that people don't really know sometimes that if the man is arrested and their life is preserved, they still have other organizations that they can reach out to that would be able to help them. So the interlink there should be at a point when you are reporting this issue, right? This is information that the police must be able to give to the people to say, look, yes, this is the provider, but we can link you to such and such an organization that would be able to help you. And if we can get that information out there, people would be more willing to get the help. So we have different organizations that can still come in and help out. Your life is preserved. At the same time, you are given the platform to get back on your feet. But I mean...
we have a call. Let me just pick this call.
Okay.
Hello, good morning. Your name and where you're calling us from? Bwino Mauka Bwanji. Okay, Vashmagi, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning. You are sounded like a counselor.
Good morning, Washmagi.
Morning. Yeah. You know the point of GBV, it is very sad. Because we are aware that the marriage is a happiness life. So how did it come GBV, gender-based violence, Gambo Menyan? So the fact of the matter that the first issue is seek God first. Seek God first. Secondly, we have a culture where we come from, that where we have in other language, say Wanachimbusa, Shibukombe, whatever. And also the family. They see when you are getting married, they thought that where you are going, keep this and this in order to keep your husband, and also a lady will be taught to the families before they go to Banachimbusa. So it's beginning at home. That's the point. Now, the only issue I've seen here, don't go in the marriage emotionally. Emotionally meaning there is something when I'm mind that Chinamuyendela just because in this but you don't know a person you're going to. You don't know a person you're going to marry to. You must know, because that's your second parent as well. That's what the Bible says. Who shall come to parent and stick to each other. But how much do you know the person you're going to? So for us, we have seen in you, Torankan, the journalist, every time 1,000 marriage broken because they don't know what they're going to. Because even the marriage is being blessed by God when He gives Adam and Eva. And that's where we got our marriage and produce children. But don't just go just because you are more than in a motoka. abayeza waona mukazi just because he's know that person. And when you go into marriage, make sure that peace shall prevail there. Love wachinja na wanzako mbanje 17 hours ya kwana wakula bread ka biscuit wampelekela na eve amuna wanga babwela. That's what
Vashmag, you can wrap up.
The point what you are talking here is love, no beating here. Stop gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is an offense. Love each other. If you are going to marry to start beating each other, don't marry. Thank you.
Thank you, Vashmagi. What would you say to that?
He brings out very important points, It's true that you need to know the person that you're settling with. Now, when we say know the person that you're settling with, what are we saying? We also need to have an understanding of our different personalities. You and I are completely different people, right? And we have personality types. It's the same thing with the marriage. You get married to a person and they have their personality, you have your personality. We need to have an understanding of that so that we can understand how do we resolve conflicts based off of our personality. What is the background of this person? It's very important to do the research. One of the sad things that happens is that people become desperate, maybe later to get married, right? And they tend to ignore the red flags, as we call them now. Some of the things that you will see perpetuated in a relationship, that is the same thing that you're going to see even when you get married. But people, because I just want to settle down, like he said, you just want to get married and you tend to ignore these things. It's important to do your background search as well. Try to understand who you're getting married to and see whether that works out or not. It's very important. He brings out very, very valid points, I must say.
And I've also heard people rushing into marriage because maybe they feel they are catching up with age. What would you tell such people who want to get married for wrong reasons, to a man they feel they shouldn't even be with because they feel they're catching up with age? You know how society it all talks about a woman who's not married when they reach a certain age. What would be your advice?
I'll then address society. Can we stop that nonsense of putting people under pressure? You know what I mean? Then we are sending them to, marriages where they shouldn't even be. We need to do better as people. That's just the message out there. You can't keep on pressuring somebody. Get married. Let people get married right. Even if they get married late, but at least they're in a right marriage. It is the pressure from society that tends to send people to, wrong relationships and the like. So I wouldn't really necessarily say we should address it to the people, because if society keeps on giving that pressure, we are going to see people, retaliating and behaving in a certain way because of that. So let's let people, flow in their destiny and make the right decisions. Yes, we want people to get married, we want people to be happy, but what is your interpretation of what getting married looks like? You know what I mean? If society will say get married just because you have to be married by a certain age, then now we are disadvantaging people. But let's look at what really matters. Okay, where are we sending this person? What kind of a person are they getting married to? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to feel fulfilled? I think that's what matters most. So let's stop it. We shouldn't pressure people into that situation. And for people that feel pressured, there's much more to life than you getting married because people want you to get married. Are you ready for marriage, right? What does marriage look like to you? And this person that you've met, do they align with what marriage looks like to you? I think those are the important questions that we need to ask each other.
You can call us on 0956-200-490. You can send a message on the same number, 0956-200-490, or you can leave a message in the comment section that's on Facebook, RCV News. We continue with our discussion for today, which is gender-based violence. And in the studios, I am joined by a GBV advocate who is Madam Alice Sakala, and I am your host, Christabel Kamono. Now, Mom, depending on the impact of the cases of GBV, Offenders face penalties with minimum prison sentence spanning from 15 years to life imprisonment. Now, as an advocate, do you think there's need to stiffen the punishment from the already existing laws?
Okay, so I personally feel like, the laws that are being enforced now were good, right? If somebody gets arrested, let's say for 15 years, I mean, that's stiff enough punishment. We are trying to change the behavior. It's not so much the stiffness of the punishment, I feel, but it is how quickly justice is served, and that justice is served. I'll give you an example of a very interesting story that I read recently, where we were actually taught that in should be China, if I'm not mistaken, there were 3 people that were executed in public view because of sexual offenses, and apparently after that a lot of people actually deterred, and they've seen that the cases of sexual assault have gone down. I'm sure we're yet to see how that plays out, and those are like really stiff punishments, you know what I mean? And when you go through something and you experience it, and you'd call for whatever form of justice, because you just want to get justice served. But I feel like it is more of a quicker way of getting justice served. If we are going to say, we have laws, and I believe that the laws have been put in place by experts who understand that this is how it should be done, and they are working right. But what we want is to see people change their behavior because of the law being enforced. So stiffening the punishment might not really answer the question. It's about how quickly can justice be served.
Before I could continue the program, let me just pick this call. Hello, good morning. You're live on Radio Christian Voice. Your name and where you're calling us from?
Dine Peter nitumila kumonze.
Peter, you can go through with your contribution this morning.
Itupike mene mwaleta nya mushe maningi. Then tizanga napo bakambepo maningi pankani amene ya gender based violence. Bakambepo maningi pali ma headman. I think kuli muminzu mumukati. Kwati yo 10,000 plus amene bakamba iyo. Yo 10,000 plus amene bakamba iyo. Niya mutauni naja matauni naija maminzi ali pafupi na matauni. Manje ngati mwaenda muminzi mukati umo. Naamba instead nkale plus zankala time. Elo futi wankambepo maningi pa ma headman.
Hello? Right, I think we've gotten part of what he was trying to put across.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it falls back to what we discussed earlier, Christabel, where we're saying whatever interventions we're putting in place when it comes to awareness, we need to take them to wherever a human being is, right? We mentioned to say, look, GBV affects a human being, whether they're male or they're female. And we have talked about how we should raise awareness, but at the same time, when we are raising their awareness, what interventions are we putting in place? And I think he raises a very valid point. Statistics, yes, could be very much concentrated on, urban areas and the like, but there are people in rural areas that the message haven't reached. Are we sure that people in the deepest rural area know that there's a toll-free line, for example? And I think when somebody raised the concern to say, when the person is arrested, are they going to have the fine? Is the family going to be taken care of? Those are issues that we'll see more in the rural areas, because maybe now somebody's thinking, what's going to happen to me next? And so he's very right, actually, and that is why we are saying traditional leaders can be very influential in curbing this. If we can have traditional leaders aligned and understanding to say, look, we are speaking one voice and we are fighting GBV, we are going to have even people in those areas actually bringing out and reporting those cases. So when we say my headman here, what I can say is we need to empower our traditional leaders with the right information and have them take it down even to the last person. That is still a life that matters. I mentioned earlier that for me GBV would be stolen lives, you know what I mean? So regardless of where that life is, they still matter, and they still need to get the message that you can get the help and you do not have to suffer in silence. So he's very right. If you are a headman, what are you doing in your capacity as a leader of the community to take that message to all your people? Let them all understand to say, this is how we are fighting GBV, and your life matters, and you can get the help and you can get back on your feet. So he raises a very, very valid point. Rural areas, the most rural of areas, still need to get the message, because we still have our people there, and every life matters regardless of where it is.
And let me take you back. Before we received a phone call, we're talking about, I'll say, stiffer punishment, but I remember you said it's not about stiffening the punishment for GBV, but it's ensuring that justice prevails.
Yes, quickly.
Quickly.
That's what people look for. I'll take you back to my experience, right? It's closure, and that doesn't bring back my sister, doesn't bring back my mother and father's daughter, right? It doesn't bring back the aunt and the that nieces and nephews lost. It doesn't put her back on the family table. But what it does is that it helps with closure. And very important that people get closure. But aside from that, it sends a message to future perpetrators that this issue is going to be handled the way it is supposed to be handled. Our justice system has ways of handling these issues. What people want to know is that justice will be served. When it hasn't been prevented, of course, which is what we are advocating for, right? That we do not have these GBV cases, but in a case that it has happened and it is in the hands of the law, let's get justice quickly. Let people know to say this one will not be pushed under the carpet, and we will not have this, no that, but people will actually get the punishment as it should be with most issues to do with justice and the law. Let justice be served quickly.
Talking about some cases being pushed under the carpet, there's been a trend where cases involving influential individuals tend not to favor victims of GBV, and sometimes such cases are thrown out after a little something is given. Do you think the fight against GBV in the country is just?
If we have cases like that, Christabel, then the fight is not just. Justice must be justice, regardless of who I am. Money must not exempt me from accountability, right? And so what that means is that we are weakening our justice system. And, it's all fun and games until you are on the other side and you are the one that is seeking justice. You know what I mean? Because then you've lost a loved one and the like. So if that is the case, then it is not just. People must get what they need to get when it comes to justice, regardless of who they are. If you are a perpetrator of GBV, it doesn't matter where you are, what your name is, it doesn't matter what you have, right? That is the only way we are going to win the fight, is if people know that our justice is consistent, right? Regardless of who the person is, if they're a perpetrator and they're perpetrating GBV, they must get the justice that should come to them. That is the only way we are going to send the right message. I don't feel that the system must change depending on who we are dealing with. Then now we are failing, because like we've said, for me GBV is not a statistic. It is a heart that was beating, right? It is a person whose life has been changed. And if you are the one that is behind making sure that a person's life is lost, or that you're causing pain or emotional torture, we should see the justice system be just. That is why we call it justice, right? So we should see it be just, regardless of who it is that is on the other side. If that is how we are fighting GBV, then we are losing, because our fight must be, consistent. And if we are not doing that, then we are failing our people. If we are failing our people, we need to revisit how we do things and ensure that everyone gets the justice that they deserve.
We have a message here from Evans Kitwe, and he says, sometimes women, ladies and mothers can become so uncontrollable. Maybe we are drinking, Having outside affairs and marriage, maybe misled by friends, calls from other men, it breaks men down. Well, before you could answer that, let me just pick up this call.
Okay.
Good morning, you're live on Radio Christian Voice, your name and where you're calling us from.
This is Dr. Barney, and I'm calling from Ndola. I wanted to find out, I have some songs that I wanted to send over there. I wanted to find out how you do that.
All right. Then after the program, I'll be able to send you a contact to talk to.
Okay, by the way, I didn't even know you had a program. What's the program you're having?
This is Community Forum, and we're talking about gender-based violence, how it can be prevented going forward, looking at the numbers that we recorded in the first quarter of 2026, which is over 10,000 cases.
That's a big problem. How many minutes more you have? I can call in specifically for that in 1-2 minutes.
Sure. You can call us back. That's okay.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. So we have another message from Gesham. What can I say? What I can say is people know that it's an offense. Let those reap what they sow. We have another call. Good morning, your name and where you're calling us from.
This is Andrew Makonde calling you from Livala South.
You can go ahead with your contribution.
Yes, actually, I'm happy. The way you are articulating issues, actually, that's the way to go. So let's keep on sensitizing the public on how to on how we can prevent GBV. Actually, keep it up.
Thank you very much. Well, you can keep texting in. You can call us on 0956 200 490. You can leave a message on the comment section, which is on Facebook, RCV.
I think, Christabel, earlier there was a message from Evans that you had read, and he was highlighting issues of how women can become uncontrollable and the like. Yes, my worry really is GBV is not control. Yes, GBV is not a solution to cheating. It's not a solution to, the issues that he has highlighted. There are other ways of handling those, and GBV is not one of them. It isn't. And that's why we were talking about the issues of conflict resolution, healthy relationships, and the like. Look, if somebody is cheating on you, leave. If you can't handle it, you know what I mean? It shouldn't come to that. And so when he highlights an issue of, they become uncontrollable and you want to exert your control by beating up a person, that does not answer the issues that you have highlighted there, right? If a person is staying out late with friends, like you mentioned, beating is not the solution to that, okay? It is now healthy communication, healthy dialogue, right? People must learn to dialogue. If you are dealing with the issues highlighted and you feel like, inflicting pain on a person is going to answer to that question, it really doesn't. Our perspective of what control is flawed if we think that control is, physical harm or emotional harm. That is not control. And those are the issues that we need to address. Remember, we said there's awareness, but then there's also intervention to change behavior, right? Those are the perceptions that our interventions must address. To say, look, if they cheat, beat. If they cheat, you make a decision as an individual. Am I going to stay with this person and work it out, or am I going to leave? You must not cause physical harm as an answer to that. It will still happen again. Let's take it back to children, right? When we used to discipline children, by beating. You'll beat the child today for doing this. Tomorrow they'll go and do the same thing. You know what I mean? So there is a different approach, and beating or, physical harm, emotional harm is just not one of those things.
All right. You mentioned of how people should leave when their spouses cheat on them. That's if they can't handle that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'll take it back to society.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the times when these marriages end, it's usually women that they blame.
Mm-hmm.
That you failed
Yeah.
you have failed,
Mhm.
not necessarily men. What would
Mhm.
you say about that?
Yeah, see, society is really taking people down a wrong path. You know, there are so many opinions, so many opinions. Do what works for you. People will always talk. When you leave, they'll talk. When you stay, they'll talk, right? But I think it has to do with people being, at a point where you understand to say, this is my life, my decisions, and I have to do something that works out for me. Society really shouldn't be the center of your decision making. It shouldn't. You must be able to understand who you are as an individual, what your principles, what your values are, what you will take and what you will not take. Okay? And if you feel like this space I'm in is not working out, trust me, life can be rebuilt. What usually keeps people bound is their fear, what will people say and the like. But really, your life matters more, your well-being matters more, your mental health matters more. That is the message that we're trying to send to people, to say, look, there's far much more beyond what people's opinions are. You need to think about you. Sometimes people will say, I am staying for the kids, right? But who will the kids have when you're dead? That's I'm staying because abana, but those children are losing their mother. In the first place, the person that you are, because of GBV, is not the best version of a mother that your children can have. So even if you are staying for the children, what type of a mother are you giving them? Because sometimes, because of GBV, people become violent and bitter towards their children. So yes, you're staying for the children, but who are you giving those children? What kind of a mother do they have? And okay, let's say the worst comes to the worst and you die. And you said you were staying for the children. You are dead. You cannot even take care of those children that you are staying for in the same place. We need to challenge some of these toxic mindsets and call a spade, okay? If you're going to be a mother, be a great mother. And you will not be a great mother when you're being abused. That's just a fact. Your children are going to experience, the example that they have now is flawed already. When they grow up, and that is now the fight that they must have. The trauma of seeing their mother abused consistently is what they have to deal with, and that is how they'll interpret their relationships as adults. So do we see what we are doing by saying I'm staying, for the children, or because people have opinions? We shouldn't do things like that. Let's challenge those toxic mindsets and get people to a better space when it comes to mental health.
Well, we can go on and on, but unfortunately, we need to end the program.
Yeah.
Your final words to the perpetrators of GBV, and of course the victims and those who do not want to report, in a minute.
Seek help. Get the help that you need. If you are a perpetrator, seek help. If you're a victim, seek help. Most importantly, don't stay in an abusive relationship. Get the help that you need. Report when you're being abused. And if you feel like you have issues managing yourself, please, let's speak. We have professionals. We have people that we can reach out to and get the help that we need. We still need you alive and well. Please seek the help that you need.
Thank you very much, Ma'am, for being part and parcel of Community Forum.
Thank you so much. I've had a great time and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Well, this marks the end of today's edition of Community Forum. I was your host, Christabel Kamanu, and in the studios, I was joined by a gender-based violence advocate, Madam Alice Sakala. Until next